Hello folks, welcome back to the Sovereignty Masterclass. Hope everyone is doing very well, studying very hard as always. In this presentation, we're going through the notes I've taken out of the ABCs of the UCC on Article 8, which is investment securities. Okay, so this is a very, very important module for us to go through in this more advanced aspect of this journey in order for us to understand the whole securities market and industries. As we've come to learn, securities have now replaced substance as collateral for debt. Okay, so we can start formulating the neural pathways for us to understand, right, how this whole market is regulated, who are the gatekeepers, and the processes and procedures in order to get us to that point where we can get our foot in the door, okay, once we've got advanced treasury packs set up, etc., and have a good understanding of the whole UCC, which is basically the colorable law system that deals with governing this colorable currency, which has no substance, okay, which are all securities in this game of monopoly that we're in. All right, and there's a really, really good PDF that I'm going to share with you guys that I highly recommend you go away and read through in your own time, which otherwise helps just break down the processes and procedures and all the main players, okay, involved, the gatekeepers involved with turning a note, an instrument, okay, and all these corporations, whether it's the government or the corporation, right, when they're issuing corporate bonds, municipal bonds, okay, or equities, how they go through with actually turning that bit of paper, that commercial paper, into a recognized security under the SEC, Security Exchange Commission, assigned a QSIP, a SINS, an ISIN, okay, and all these agencies involved in getting that process done to jump through all the necessary hoops in order to then release it into the markets and then get the credit in return. Okay, so this is so important for us to understand. So this is something you can go through as homework off the back of reading through the notes that I've taken out of the book, and obviously highly recommend purchasing this book too and reading from cover to cover. So it's got, you know, a little bit more explanatory depth, but you know, I'll cover pretty much 70 to 80% of what we need to learn in order to get over to that next step, right, on this journey. But it's really, really quite interesting. One that you want to read through multiple times for those who are very serious on this journey, okay, and it will build on itself. Just give yourself time, let your spirit grow into it. It can be a little bit of a head spin, you know, for all these acronyms and, you know, kind of short terms and banking terminology, etc. But it is worth knowing, okay, and it's really going to put you in good stead going forwards when it comes to having your advanced treasury pack sent in. And a good idea is to now how to access the so-called financial markets in order to, you know, get hold of and also issue your own securities, okay. So this is quite a good PDF. It's got some good graphics in there, it's colourful. Okay, so yeah, highly recommend going away off the back of going through these notes to read through in your own time. Okay, and what's also good about this is that it starts introducing us to the next and last article that we'll be going through in this mini-series, which is Secured Transactions, Article 9. Okay, so with that being said, sit tight and let's read through what the book has to say. So, whenever securities were traded, whether in person or by phone, the settlement of the trade required that physical certificates be delivered from the seller to the purchaser. Also, when the securities were in registered form, as opposed to bearer form discussed below, the certificates often had to be endorsed or accompanied by an executed stock or bond power or registered in the purchaser's name on the issuer's books. This focus on the physical transfer of certificates was and remains today a highly labour-intensive and complicated process, but the first completed version of Article 8, approved in the 1950s and not widely enacted, recognised the concept of constructive delivery of securities held in street name by brokers. In the 1962 version of Article 8, prompted by a variety of non-uniform amendments proposed by New York, there it is again, New York, it's a bit of a wild card, okay, black sheep within this system, New Babylon, included provisions for the transfer and pledge of securities held within a central depository system or clearing corporation. With these steps, the importance of physical transfer began to diminish and the concept of indirect holding began to emerge. Article 8 sought to reduce the systemic burden of transferring physical certificates by recognising the role of multiple intermediary relationships, as either version had not, and also by providing for a system in which issuers would no longer need to issue certificates at all. Instead, a system of dematerialisation was invented, under which ownership of uncertificated securities would be reflected merely by an entry in the records of the issuer in favour of the owner and not by any piece of paper. Okay, it's just this common theme of everything being digitized, okay, put on the electronic platform. Transfers of security, whether certificated or uncertificated, could be accomplished by transaction confirmations and book entries by intermediaries instead of by physical delivery. An extensive pattern of security immobilization and indirect holding has developed. Under this pattern, physical certificates are still issued but tend not to be in the hands of the ultimate beneficial owners. Instead, they are immobilized with a clearing corporation and registered in the name of the clearing corporation, or, for administrative reasons, the clearing corporation's nominee. The clearing corporation for most publicly traded corporate equity securities, corporate debt securities, and municipal debt securities is the Depository Trust Company, okay, DTC for short. And DTC's nominee is typically Seed and Co. And where are they located? In New York, okay. Where's the World Trade Center? In New York, all right. Where's Bloomberg, which is the main terminal that all these brokers use to access the markets and all the information, do all their buying and selling? In New York, all right. Where's the UN, the United Nations HQ? In New York. Anyway, I guess it's quite obvious by now how important New York is. The clearing corporation's books indicate the ownership interests of the brokers or banks that are its members, and the records of those intermediaries in turn indicate the ownership interests of their customers, i.e. lower tier intermediaries are at the bottom of the chain, the actual investors, people like yourself and I, for instance. So we have here the direct holding system. Okay, each investor is registered as the securities owner on the books of the issuer. Obviously just scan this out of the book, so which are often maintained by a transfer agent, or at least has the right to be so registered. This can be illustrated as in figure 1. Okay, you've got the issuer, then direct connection to the investor. In the indirect holding system, most investors do not and cannot deal directly with the issuer in that way. Instead, they hold their investment through intermediaries. Okay, the indirect holding system is not entirely independent of the direct holding system, though in the case of securities, the entity at the top of the chain of indirect ownership has a direct holding system relationship with the issuer. This linkage between the two systems, as well as some typical relationships within the indirect holding system, can be illustrated as in figure 2. Okay, this is figure 2. You've got the issuer, then issues to the Depository Trust Company, okay, goes through all the necessary protocols which are outlined in this PDF, okay, with the lawyers, the underwriters, okay, and then obviously the transfer agent within the DTCC. Once everything's ticked and approved, it can then be issued into the markets where either you have a broker who'll purchase it, and then on behalf of the investor, okay, which holds accounts with the broker, but ultimately it's all cleared and settled through the DTC. Then also you have a bank, which can then have a broker under it as well as the investor. Okay, so that's basically how this is structured. It's quite simple, really. And obviously ask the question, what is needed and how to issue a security before this whole process, and that is all answered, okay, in this PDF. So an issuer defined in subsection 8201 is the person responsible for the performance of the obligations represented by a security, usually the enterprise that places its name on the security certificate as an indication that the security certificate represents debt or equity of that enterprise. So you've got two main players, right, within the markets who come to issue securities. You'll have the government, which will typically issue municipal bonds in order to raise funds for public spending, okay, that investors can then buy into and receive interest payments on, and then once it matures, the principal of the amount that they've invested in the first place, or portion of, the bond they actually bought, okay. Likewise, you have in the corporate world, they can issue equity, okay, which is basically a stake in their company, a share, a stock share, as well as corporate bonds, okay, in order to raise capital through either the debt market or obviously selling portions of the company, okay, which both would obviously end up paying out dividends, okay, which is the proceeds from the operations of that company or government. And then we also have, we can learn ourselves to issue our own securities by getting people in default via the private administrative procedure. Okay, we can get a certificate of default, then get it graded, and obviously turn that instrument, that note, into a security and sell it to a Series 7 broker at a discount. If you recollect, we go through under Article 3 the concept of discounting these securities. Okay, so rather than wait for the lump sum of, say, you've got someone in default, okay, one of these agents who have violated or injured you, okay, and you seek remedy and recourse for their actions, rather than wait over a certain amount of time for them to repay, you can actually just take that certificate of default, jump through all the necessary hoops in order to get it registered, certified, leaned upon in the UCC, controlled, perfected, etc. You can then get it sold and obviously graded and insured, underwritten. This is where the indemnity bond comes in, okay, for those folks who are on the advanced treasury pack. If you're not there yet, it all makes sense once you go through that and come back here to go over it again. It will start falling into a place for you that we can then trade it, or we can basically effectively sell it to one of these Series 7 brokers at a discount of the face value, and then get the lump sum of whatever the discount is, okay, minus the discount up front, okay, we don't have to worry about it then. But we also have the other option of going to a sheriff, okay, and getting a writ of possession, or going through the courts, get a writ of possession, and actually going after some of their goods, okay. But then we also have the right of self-help, okay, in order to bring this debt collection practices into our own hands, okay, once we've got the paper, necessary paperwork backing our rights to do so, okay. So it's really quite interesting, really breaking down this industry and all the codes involved with it. So Article 8 provides that any person is entitled to complete a security certificate by filling in the blanks other than those intended for signatures, as authorised and in accordance with the general rule. A purchaser for value and without notice that a certificate has been incorrectly completed is entitled to enforce it as completed. All right, and this is what they do with anything and everything bearing our name, date, amount and signature on it that we have signed, charged with our life force. This is why it's so important to learn how to control your notes, drafts, documents and securities to ensure it can't be salvaged and used to enrich them, okay, because they can write whatever they want on there in order to turn that thing into a security, which makes them money, okay, which is basically drawing credit on our account, which is pretty much, it's unlimited. Issuers occasionally impose liens on the securities that they issue for the purpose of securing payments owed to the issuer by the holder. An issuer's lien is not valid against a purchaser unless the lien is noted conspicuously on the security certificate, and that's codified in 8209. An endorsement is simply a signature placed on a security certificate in registered form or on an accompanying document such as a stock power for the purpose of transferring or redeeming the security, and that's codified in 8102A11. Okay, you've got to think this is where the medallion stamp comes in. No endorsement of the security certificate by the transferor is required, and no physical transfer of possession of the certificate is required. Physical transfer is also not generally essential for legal transfer. As an allocation of risk mechanism, persons endorsing security certificates are deemed to make certain warranties to purchases, including warranties that the certificate is genuine, that the endorsement is effective, that the transfer does not violate any restrictions on transfer, and that there are no adverse claims to the security. And again, this is basically the role of the medallion stamp, which you can either get done at a bank, okay, as a securities agent would do that for you to validate and authenticate that security, and or with a broker. So we've got a maxim here, okay, which basically means no one gives what he does not have. Okay, an adverse claim is a claim that a person other than the purchaser has a property interest in the security, and that it is a violation of the claimant's rights for another person to hold, transfer or otherwise deal with the security, and that's codified in 8102A1. And this is so very important, this concept, because we have got an adverse claim in our securities being traded in the markets. Okay, it is our property and we have rights and interest in it. So a protected purchaser is a purchaser who, as given value, does not have notice of any adverse claim and obtains control of the security, and that's codified in 8303A. The indirect holding system is a pattern of security ownership and transfer in which investors, the ultimate beneficial owners of securities, have no direct relationship with the issuer. Instead, they hold entitlements to securities through a securities intermediary. A security entitlement might be thought of by a non-lawyer simply as rights to a security that an investor holds indirectly. That is for a broker or other intermediary rather than in a direct relationship with the issuer. Okay, we have a security entitlement. We are the entitlement holder to all security interests of the strawman due to our security agreement. So we have a security entitlement is a bundle of property rights and contract rights resulting from an undertaking by a securities intermediary to provide an entitlement holder the rights that constitute a security or other financial asset. The entitlement holder acquires the security entitlement in most cases when the securities intermediary credits the financial asset to the entitlement holder's securities account. This is what we are seeking to do when we liquidate the estate, which is explained in the Advanced Treasury Pack module. Intermediaries' agreements with their entitlement holders are subject to the law of contracts, which brings into play policing doctrines such as fraud in the inducement and unconscionability, codified in 1201b3 and 103b. Most municipal bonds and certain issues of commercial paper are issued in book entry only form, meaning that direct ownership is not available to anyone other than a depository. These are the gatekeepers, the DTC, the banks and the brokers. So we're going to have to be setting up brokerage accounts. Obviously, with the back of the Treasury Pack, we should get a Treasury Direct account set up as well. And this is how we can gain access to the municipal bond market with the Treasury. And then obviously with the brokers, how we get access to the rest of the market. And with the DTC as well, we can actually become our own transfer agents when we get the necessary applications done with our FINS number, cage codes, etc. But that's more advanced, but it's just to prime you guys and introduce it to your subconscious, all these concepts, that inevitably I think a lot of you here, if you have gone through this series, are serious enough to want to actually see this through and become the change you want to see and become your own private banker, sui juris, under full control, managing and administering your own estate and controlling all of your security interests and securities. So we have entitlement holders are protected from adverse claims to a financial asset if they acquire their security entitlement for value and without notice of the adverse claim. The security agreement that we make up provides value and protects us from any adverse claims along with the UCC 1 filing. A security interest is an interest in personal property which secures payment or performance of an obligation. That's codified in 1201(35). It gives its holder, the secured party, the right in the event of default on the obligation secured to exercise certain self-help remedies with respect to the collateral agreed upon with the debtor. And that's codified in 9102A, 72, 12 and 28. So this is starting getting into Article 9, secured transactions. A security interest is said to be created or to have attached when it is enforceable between the secured party and the debtor. A security interest is said to be perfected when the secured party's claim to the collateral is protected against competing interests of third-party claimants through the debtor, including the debtor's trustee in bankruptcy. This is what we are doing with the security agreement, UCC 1 filing, etc. That should be quite obvious. Investment property is a label for a type of collateral, distinguishing it from other Article 9 categories of collateral, such as goods, instruments, accounts, and so on. That Article 9 governs by other rules. The term is broad, covering all Article 8's turf, security entitlements, and securities accounts, as well as interests in commodity contracts and commodity accounts, which are not governed by Article 8, but are, insofar as security interests are concerned, closely analogous to security entitlements and securities accounts, respectively. We do have investment property, financial assets, and securities in our name, in a strawman's name, that we have every right to bequest, and get back and claim back. The first generally available means is to obtain a security agreement and give value in the broad sense of Section 1204 with respect to collateral in which the debtor has rights. Section 9203b12, the security agreement should expressly grant the security interest, describe the collateral, identify the obligation secured, and be authenticated by the debtor. And that's codified in section, I think that should be 9102A73 and 9203B3A. We have all the debtor's assets, and this is obviously what we pledge in the collateral section of the UCC 1 financing statement and in the security agreement. When we go to liquidate the estate with Form 706 and Form 709, the 1041, if we cannot get our hands on our master file with all the SINs, ISIN numbers, the SINs numbers, etc., they will do that for us based on the fact that we have now bound them as trustees with our indemnity bond, Form 56, the executive letter, etc. And that's what that Treasury Pack is doing. It's basically binding them as trustees, but we're coming in as executive beneficiaries, with the first in right, first in time, first in line rights as entitlement holder, lien creditor, and holder in due course, the protected holder, to receive the proceeds that are owed to us of all the securities that have been traded off the back of the strawman certificate bond, which is our birth certificate. So yes, it'd be very interesting to see what happens with that. But there is a way under the Freedom of Information Act that we can get our hands on the master file, and it talks about this in the PDF, which is really quite interesting towards the back, okay, which is basically all of these accounts and records that are held, okay, so you've got here the QSIP master file, the ISIN master file, and the SINS master file, okay, that I believe you can get your hands on, because I've heard Peter Joseph Polinsky say that he was working with a woman who got her hands on all of the securities that were otherwise traded in her name, which they managed to retrieve the QSIP and ISIN numbers of, and that's when you go through to obviously put on the form 706 and 709 when it comes to claiming those assets. Okay, so if you actually know that, you can also put it on your UCC1 under the collateral within your security agreement. But when you say all assets as a kind of cover for all, it will still fall under that bracket. Okay, everything that's otherwise been issued and traded in your strawman name is what's being claimed. Okay, and that's what we have every right to receive back for our benefit. So although the security interest will be created by a properly drafted security agreement, it will remain unperfected, i.e. vulnerable to the claims of the debtors, other creditors, and the trustee in a bankruptcy proceeding, unless it is perfected as described below. The creditor whose security interest is not automatically perfected will typically want to perfect it by taking additional appropriate steps, usually obtaining control or filing a financing statement. Okay, and that's exactly what we do. Filing consists of the completion and the filing with the appropriate public office of a financing statement, identifying the debtor and secured party and providing other relevant data, notably a statement indicating the types or describing the items of collateral in section 9502A and 9516B. Filing is usually carried out more or less contemporaneously with the execution of a security agreement, because filing does not ordinarily create the security interest, subsection 938. So it's the security agreement that creates the entitlement holder, and that's what makes us the entitlement holder. Okay, and then it's the UCC1 filing that's basically giving a public notice of what has been agreed between the creditor and the debtor, us and our strawman. Okay, and just letting the whole world know basically. And because the UCC, again, is under international maritime admiralty law, which deals with international contracts, I believe no matter where you file within the state of the United States, it will be recognized internationally. Okay, but there's obviously, it's more favorable to file as a foreign entity, probably either in New York or Washington, DC, District of Columbia. However, they only deal with records, deeds of records, okay, and don't actually have a UCC because they're not considered a state. Whereas I've gone with Washington State, okay, which is actually in Virginia, near Virginia. But however, that would still be recognized internationally, okay? And this is why we're doing the things that we're doing in regards to making sure we're perfecting, our security interest and jumping through all the right hoops and following what is otherwise outlined in the code. So one of Article 9's most important principles is that if the collateral is sold without the secured party's authorization, a security interest attaches to any identifiable proceeds of the collateral, and that's codified in 9315A2. When we become secured party and have security interest in all of our debtor strawman securities / assets, we are entitled to the proceeds of any securities being traded without our consent. So Article 9's most general priority principle is first in time, first in right. Article 9 provides that conflicting security interests rank according to priority in time of either filing or perfection. That's codified in 9322A1 and 3287. The secured party has the following remedies for its borrower's default: to sue on the debt, okay, or for any deficiency not covered by collateral, to enforce the security interest through judicial process, or most important, to exercise self-help measures as to the collateral. Article 9 self-help measures include making collections on collateral and taking control in the vernacular sense of its proceeds, for example, dividends on equity securities or payments on debt securities. B, taking possession of collateral, for example, of security certificates. C, selling or otherwise disposing of collateral to a third party. And D, retaining collateral in full or partial satisfaction of the debt, sometimes referred to as strict foreclosure. Okay, and that's codified in section 9607, 9610 and 9620. Okay, and this is all part of the private administrative procedure, that if one of these agents or anybody defaults or, harms you or injures you or goes against anything under your terms and conditions with your fee schedule, you can then go through the process of getting them in default, in dishonor, get a certificate of default, get that registered, get that securitized. Okay, then you either have the option of the right of self-help or going through the courts, okay, in order to get a writ of possession and enforcing collection, etc. So this is what I mean, you've got to start thinking like an international creditor. Okay, that's where all the power lies. And all that separates a debtor from a creditor within this system is knowledge of these codes, okay, and all these processes and procedures that are involved in creating, regulating, and enforcing securities. So the United States Treasury issues securities through a commercial book entry system known as the Treasury Reserve Automated Debt Entry System, or TRADES for short. Nearly identical regulations have also been issued by the various other government-sponsored entities that maintain securities in the Federal Reserve Bank's book entry system, such as the Government National Mortgage Association, known as Ginnie Mae, the Federal National Mortgage Association, known as Fannie Mae, and the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, known as Freddie Mac. Outside of trades, persons may also hold interests in Treasury securities through a system called Treasury Direct, in which beneficial owners maintain direct account relationships with the Treasury. Okay. Two relatively recent international developments are important to the law applicable to interest in securities held through intermediaries. The first, originally sponsored by the Hague Conference on Private International Law, addresses choice of law questions, and the second, sponsored by UNIDROIT, which is the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law, addresses substantive law. The premise of both projects is that the rapid emergence of a global capital market in securities requires a new platform of legal rules that will serve the needs of participants in that market. Again, this is what the UCC is a model for. Okay, so at some point in the future, the UCC will be publicly recognized in all states that are signed on to the UNIDROIT Member State Statute or Act. Okay. So for future developments on the UNIDROIT project, one good source of information is expected to be the international law section of the Uniform Commercial Code survey published each August by the Business Lawyer. Okay, so that's one to keep an eye out on. Obviously, as this whole New World Order, moves forward and sets itself up, like I said, it's not going to be a bad thing for those who are in control as international creditors, okay, who has this knowledge of knowing how to be on the right side of the ledger and manage all their documents and securities. Okay, but obviously for those who are in that precarious position of being, signed onto the hamster wheel, not knowing that they produce the credit in the first place, but it's under this system with the tricks and traps and these vultures, where everything's subrogated. Okay, hopefully, we'll be able to obviously be the change we want to see and help those who wish to help themselves. Some of them, some people are just so ingrained within the system that you expose any light to them or just blind them and they look the other way, and they're happy on the hamster wheel, servicing the system, paying their debts, etc. So be it, you've got to leave them to it. Okay, but for those of you who are on the path, inevitably, you will be the change you wish to see, and you'll start coming into unlocking your wealth, your freedom. Other people will start paying attention then, and it'll just be a matter of, feeding and leading people to the right direction, or even educating them yourself as to, the situation we find ourselves in, what is actually happening with the monetary system, the economics, okay, the securities, these industries, okay, and the power of our own signature, all right? And that obviously all comes from knowing these things, knowing these codes, and how all these procedures work. So just to finish off with, have put a link for you folks to go and watch, which is again another really good presentation by Law Shelf on securities law, investment securities. Okay, so you've got, I think, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, we obviously went through the bit of exchange in Article 3. Okay, so you've got a good 5 lessons there, which again, I really do recommend you guys go through and watch. It can just help add even greater explanatory depth and different angles in order for you to understand certain concepts. You also have the QSIP, okay, common language for capital markets or for efficient markets, which again is a must read for anyone who's serious in this journey to gain a better understanding as to how this whole industry works and this whole economic system works. Okay, so that's down to you to go through in your own time, and that will set you up really, really well for the future when it comes to setting up the more advanced things in regards to becoming a private banker. Okay, so with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. Hope that's been educational. Go away, watch it through multiple times, buy the book, read the book, watch the presentations on YouTube, read through the PDF on QSIPs, okay, and you'll be really in the elite of not many people knowing about this, but you know, the international creditors, those who are benefiting from the system. Okay, so inevitably putting in the hard yards now will set yourself up in order to benefit from it in the future. Okay, so that's that. I'll see you over in the next presentation where we'll be going over Article 9, secured transactions. All right, guys, thank you. See you then. Cheers. Bye-bye.